The grand halls of the family estate seemed eerily still, the high ceiling casting long shadows over the meticulously arranged furniture. The polished wooden floors reflected the soft glow of oil lamps, their warm light doing nothing to soften the chill that lingered in the air. She moved slowly through the corridor, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpets that lined the floor. The house was vast, too vast, and yet, there was no place within it that felt like home. The walls that once felt protective now loomed over her like distant sentinels, indifferent to her presence. Every corner seemed to whisper of someone else, someone whose presence here mattered more than hers. The weight of the estate's silence pressed on her chest, suffocating in its coldness. As she walked past the ancestral portraits lining the hallway, their painted eyes never seemed to meet hers. They belonged to another time, another legacy. It was as though they were gazing at someone far more worthy. She paused before one, the faintest memory stirring in her mind. Her mother had once stood before this very painting, laughing with pride about the family's ancient heritage. But that was before everything had changed. In the reflection of the polished wood, she saw her own face, pale, drawn, and foreign to herself. The years of silence had carved deep lines into her expression, lines that no longer reflected the bright girl she once was, but a woman discarded, pushed to the side. It was the look of someone who had been erased from the very history she had once hoped to inherit. A soft sigh escaped her lips. She didn't even realize she had been holding her breath. The house, for all its beauty and history, felt like a gilded cage. The silence was louder than any word. Her heart had once swelled with pride for the house, but now it simply ached. Every piece of furniture, every vase, every calligraphy scroll, each seemed to mock her, a reminder of what she had lost. The room ahead, the one with the heavy velvet curtains and the gold-trimmed doors, was the heart of the house, the family hall where matters of importance were decided. She had once sat there, at the head of the table, full of hope and potential. But now, as she stood at the threshold, she could no longer find the courage to enter. The doors were closed, but not locked. She hesitated. How many times had she stood outside, waiting for her turn to speak, only to hear voices raised in another's favor? How many times had she felt the cold weight of indifference as her own voice was drowned out by those with more influence, more support? Slowly, her gaze shifted to the far corner of the room, where the younger sister sat, smiling sweetly, her presence commanding attention. The family's patriarch, her father, leaned toward her, his voice low but filled with approval. The younger sister had always been the favored one. She had always known it, even as a child. Every day had been a reminder that the title of heiress belonged to someone else. She had been the spare, the one to be married off to secure alliances, never the one to hold real power. She had lived her life under the illusion of equality, but today, the truth had settled like a stone in her chest. The truth was simple: she was not central to this family, not to its future, not to its legacy. She had been quietly pushed to the margins, her importance stripped away like the petals of a wilted flower. The realization hit her like a wave, overwhelming in its sudden clarity. All these years, she had fought to be seen, to be heard, but it had been in vain. The family she had longed to belong to had already made its decision. She was expendable. The silent collapse within her body felt almost physical. Her shoulders, once held high with pride, sagged. Her steps slowed as she turned back toward the hallway. There, in the emptiness of the corridor, she paused again, looking at the doors she had not entered. She had not been called in, not truly. They had forgotten her, she had been forgotten. But something inside her stirred, a quiet defiance. Perhaps she had been cast aside, but she was not defeated. Not yet. The stillness in the air, the silence of the estate, now felt like a challenge rather than a sentence. It was not over. Not yet. A flicker of resolve burned in her chest. She would not beg for forgiveness or wait for permission. She would not remain in the shadow of someone else. It was time to move beyond this quiet suffering, this unnoticed existence. Her fate, long controlled by others, would no longer be left in their hands. A small, almost imperceptible shift in her expression, a tightening of the jaw, a faint narrowing of her eyes, was the only sign of what had been set into motion. She would take back her place in this house, in this family. The first spark of her future had been ignited, quiet but unyielding. The family hall was vast, its golden lanterns casting warm shadows that pooled along the marble floors. The intricate latticework of the wooden screens cut through the light, creating delicate patterns that seemed to dance across the polished surfaces. Yet, despite the grandeur, there was an overwhelming chill in the air. It was the kind of coldness that lingered beneath the surface, far from the warmth of the hearth, hidden in the spaces where smiles were too tight and words too carefully chosen. Today, like every day before it, the family gathered at the table, a ritual that had long since become mechanical, a hollow echo of unity. The patriarch sat at the head, his voice calm, deliberate, a man who had long since mastered the art of maintaining control without raising his tone. To his left, his lawful wife sat, poised and perfect in her manner, her face a mask of serene authority, as though the years of family rule had left no room for doubt in her position. But even beneath her composed exterior, there was a palpable distance, a coldness that she had perfected over the years, and in that silence, there was power. The younger daughter sat beside her mother, her youth and beauty obvious in the way the light played off her delicate features. She smiled with ease, her eyes never straying from the conversation, never faltering, as though everything she said was as it should be. Her voice, soft and melodic, rang with the faintest hint of authority, an air of unspoken dominance that she wore like a second skin. And then there was character 1 sitting at the far end of the table, her place not one of honor but one of neglect. The seat was carefully chosen, tucked away in a corner, far from the heart of the conversation, a quiet testament to her position within the family, out of sight, out of mind. As the servants moved about, filling the cups and serving the dishes, character 1 caught a glimpse of the steward's eyes darting away from hers. The gesture was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to confirm what she already knew. In this house, her presence was an afterthought. Every movement, every glance, every moment of the daily ritual was infused with the silent message that she was no longer needed, no longer central. The servants' hands trembled slightly as they placed the tea before her, always last, always after the others had been served, as though she were a guest in her own home. She had long since stopped reacting to it, but today, the slight felt sharper, more pronounced, as though it were a reminder that her place here was nothing more than a courtesy. The meal continued in silence, the clinking of porcelain against the lacquered table the only sound breaking the quiet tension. Words were exchanged, but not for her. Her name was mentioned in passing, a half-hearted acknowledgement of her presence that did not extend beyond the basic requirement of politeness. Her mother's eyes never once met hers, nor did the patriarch's gaze. The younger daughter, however, glanced at her briefly, but only to reaffirm her own position. The smiles were polite, but they were never meant for her. She had long ago learned to read these gestures, these fleeting moments, to understand the truth hidden beneath the surface. It was the subtle way in which the family operated, smooth, polished, yet hollow at its core. As the evening wore on, the familiar rhythm of conversation continued, each word laden with meaning that was unspoken but understood. Character 1 remained silent, watching, listening, but never participating. It was not her place to speak, not her place to question. The rules of the house were clear, and she had long since learned to abide by them, even when they felt like shackles. The tea in her cup had long since cooled, untouched, a silent reminder of her position at the table. Her fingers traced the delicate rim of the porcelain, the motion absent, almost automatic. It was a quiet surrender, a way of occupying space without truly being present. Her thoughts drifted, back to the time when she was once at the center of this family, when her name was spoken with reverence and her opinion sought after. But that was long ago, before the walls of the family had grown cold, before the younger sister had taken her place with such ease. Her absence was felt everywhere, in every glance that went unnoticed, in every word left unspoken. The patriarch's voice broke through her thoughts, his words directed toward his wife, but the power of his tone was unmistakable. It was a statement, not a suggestion. And it was clear that character 1 would remain silent, not because she had nothing to say, but because there was nothing for her to say. Her thoughts were not needed. Her presence was not needed. The room seemed to grow colder, the walls pressing in as the silence stretched on. She sat there, feeling the weight of her own invisibility, and for a moment, she wondered if she had ever truly belonged in this family or if she had always been a shadow. The realization settled over her like a heavy cloak. She was not a part of this world anymore. She had been pushed out long ago, replaced by someone far more suited to the expectations of the family. Her place was no longer at the table. Her seat was no longer hers to claim. But she had learned not to fight it. She had learned to exist in the margins, to wait in silence. And yet, even as she sat there, surrounded by the rituals and the polite formalities, a quiet thought lingered at the edge of her mind. A thought she had never allowed herself to consider fully until now. She was still here. She had not yet left. And despite all the unspoken rules that had shaped her existence, there was still time to change it. The thought burned quietly, a spark of realization, but it was enough. It was enough to stir something within her that she could no longer ignore. The memory surfaced quietly, like the still waters of a lake disturbed by a single ripple. It had been during the spring of her 17th year, a time when the estate was bursting with life, yet somehow, it was also when everything had begun to shift. The garden outside the family hall was filled with the fragrance of blooming jasmine, the air thick with the soft hum of cicadas. It had been one of those days when the family had gathered in the main courtyard to celebrate the annual spring festival. The decorations were extravagant, silk lanterns, bright with color, hanging from every branch of the ancient trees. The patriarch had been in high spirits, greeting each of the family members with a smile, but it was a smile that did not quite reach his eyes when he turned to her. At the head of the table, she had been seated as always, beneath the heavy golden canopy, a position just far enough from the patriarch's side to be respectful but not enough to signify her importance. The customary seating had been arranged with deliberate precision. The matriarch, as always, sat directly at the patriarch's right hand, with the younger daughter beside her. It was a family tradition, a way of showing the clear line of succession, the hierarchical order that would never be broken. Character 1 had sat at the opposite end, placed between distant cousins whose names she could barely remember. They were positioned so far away that their casual laughter and whispered conversation seemed almost as though they occurred in a different world entirely. And then, a moment that should have been simple, a gesture meant to show respect, changed everything. As the servants brought out the golden cups filled with the finest tea, it was always customary for the eldest to be served first, followed by the closest in line to the throne. Her mother, the matriarch, had always taken the first sip, followed by her younger sister. Character 1 had sat silently, waiting for her turn, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had not expected to be the first served. She had never expected such a thing. But the subtle shift had been undeniable when the servant moved past her, offering the cup first to the younger daughter. It had been an innocent act, an automatic gesture, as the family had long made clear their preferences. But in that moment, the weight of the slight pressed heavily on her chest, and the sting had been sharp, though no one had noticed. The cup, now passed to the younger daughter with a bow and a smile, was filled to the brim, a perfect gesture of favor, while Character 1 sat, her hand still resting in her lap, waiting. No one had said a word. The servant, in the way that all servants did when they understood their place, did not even acknowledge the slight. But Character 1 had felt it deeply, as though the space between her and the rest of her family had grown wider, more pronounced. Her place at the table was not just a physical arrangement, it was a reminder of the quiet exclusion that had become her life. Her heart had clenched as she glanced at her mother, seated in her usual place at the patriarch's side. Her mother's gaze, sharp yet distant, had met hers for a fraction of a second before looking away again, as if the fleeting connection was an intrusion, a ripple in the smooth surface of their lives. The moment was gone, erased almost immediately by the ongoing festival. But Character 1 felt the distance. She felt it in the way the conversations around her hummed without her, in the way her presence seemed almost invisible to the others. Her thoughts turned inward as she tried to make sense of the silence that had settled around her. She had once believed that her role in the family was secure, that her place was earned and respected. But now, as she sat there, on the edge of the conversation, watching her sister smile brightly at their father, she began to understand the subtle shift that had occurred. This was not just a matter of seating arrangements or social niceties. This was a reminder that she was not at the center of this world anymore. The family had chosen who would be the next to take charge, who would be the true heir. And it was not her. It was her sister. As the meal progressed, character 1 remained silent, a careful observer of the subtle shifts in the room. The exchanges between the family members grew warmer, more familiar, as they spoke of matters that did not concern her. The younger daughter spoke of her marriage prospects, her voice light and full of promise, while character 1 was left with nothing but the echo of her own thoughts. Her name was spoken only when necessary, her opinions offered only when directly asked, and even then, with a weight of hesitation that told her more than words ever could. The fine china clinked against the silverware, the rhythm of the meal progressing like clockwork. Yet, every gesture, every passing glance, spoke volumes to her. She could feel it in the air, the knowledge that she had been displaced, that she was no longer necessary to the family's future. The old loyalty, the sense of belonging, had been replaced by something colder, something far more calculated. She had been the heir once, the one who had been trained to manage the estate, to take her place at the helm. But now, that role was slipping away, and she was powerless to stop it. The warmth of the room, the laughter, the clinking of cups, it all seemed to slip further from her grasp. She had spent her entire life here, but now, in this moment, it felt as though she were nothing more than a guest, a fleeting presence in a world that no longer had room for her. The evening came to a close, and the family moved to the next room for the after-dinner tea. Character 1 followed, but the air was different now, charged with unspoken truths. The family gathered around the low table, laughing, chatting, but again, her seat was at the farthest edge of the circle, her presence barely acknowledged. The room, grand and decorated in rich reds and golds, felt distant now, as if she had wandered into a place that was never truly hers. Her heart clenched again, not with the weight of anger, but with something deeper, something she had long denied. It was a sense of otherness, a quiet realization that she had been replaced, that her time in this family was over. The family's presence in the grand hall felt even more stifling today, the air heavy with unspoken expectations. The space was meticulously arranged, as it always was, with the familiar ornate table at the center, set with 100 gleaming dishes, each more exquisite than the last. Servants moved silently, ensuring that every detail was perfect. Character 1 stood to the side, her figure almost blending with the shadows, as the patriarch and matriarch presided over the gathering. The family was gathered for the occasion of the new betrothal announcement, a matter of great significance. The young woman was to be wed into a prestigious family, her sister, the one they all favored. Her sister was a gem in their eyes, her beauty not only a reflection of the family's pride but also a bridge to greater influence. Character 1 had long since learned to sit at the periphery of such events, to remain unnoticed, to be the quiet observer. Today was no different. Her mother, the matriarch, exchanged a few words with her sister, her voice warm and approving, though it lacked the familiarity that once made it feel genuine. The patriarch, too, smiled at his younger daughter, his eyes glowing with pride as he spoke of her future. His words were suffused with weight, each sentence a promise of a future bound by alliances and power. But as the words flowed, Character 1 could not help but notice how the conversation began to dance around her, as if she were already a part of the background, a mere spectator to the family's triumphs. She was not called upon to speak, not asked to offer her opinion or share in the celebration. Her place was at the edge of the table, not at the center. The very act of standing by the side of the family, as she did now, felt like the manifestation of everything she had come to fear. The family was no longer hers to lead, no longer hers to guide. Her role, once secure, was nothing more than a shadow of what it had been. When the moment came for the patriarch to announce the engagement, his voice was firm and sure, as though he were proclaiming the future of the house itself. The room fell into silence, waiting for his words. He spoke of the bride, of her merits, of the way she would bring honor and prosperity to their family. Every sentence was a careful calculation, each word a stroke on the canvas of her sister's future. But character 1 stood there, barely acknowledged, her heart sinking with each passing moment. The patriarch had not once turned his gaze to her. Her name, when mentioned, was uttered with the briefest of nods, as if the formality of it was the only thing required to maintain the family's fragile sense of unity. It was not said with pride or joy, but with a sense of duty and obligation to include her, if only in passing. Character 1 felt the sting in the air, but she chose to ignore it, to bury the hurt beneath layers of composure. She had long since learned to do so. But today, for the first time, it was harder to ignore. As the conversation flowed around her, she noticed how everyone seemed to focus on the younger daughter, how the servants always offered her the finest dishes first, how her presence commanded attention without effort. Even the youngest. Members of the family smiled at her, fawned over her, eager to please. The weight of the world seemed to shift effortlessly to her shoulders, and character 1 was left holding nothing but the silence between them. Her mother, who once pulled her close, now seemed distant, her gaze shifting between the two daughters with measured detachment. Character 1 could not recall the last time her mother had smiled at her in the way she did her sister, could not remember when she had last received a word of genuine praise, a word that did not come with an unspoken condition. It was as though the warmth that had once defined their bond had been extinguished, replaced by something colder, more calculating. As the evening wore on, the family's attention remained fixed on her sister. Character 1 tried to keep her expression neutral, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain the appearance of indifference. She shifted in her seat, slightly uncomfortable with the way the air around her had thickened, as though everyone knew something she did not. The servants passed by her with polite nods, their hands steady and sure as they placed dishes before her, always after her sister, always with the faintest hesitation. It was a small detail, but it echoed loudly in her mind. The dish that had once been offered to her first, as the eldest, was now a mere afterthought. She could taste the bitterness in her mouth, the taste of being pushed aside. The evening continued, and as the discussion shifted to other matters, she remained silent, lost in the growing sense of alienation. She could hear her sister's laughter in the distance, a sound that once brought her comfort, now only deepened the chasm that had formed between them. No one questioned the choices being made, no one voiced dissent. It was all too easy, too smooth. The way the patriarch smiled at his younger daughter, the way her mother beamed at her, character 1 could no longer ignore the truth. Her time had passed. She was no longer a part of the family's future. The house, which had once been her domain, now felt as though it was shrinking around her. There was no room for her here anymore. She had been relegated to the edges, forgotten in favor of someone more suited to the family's needs. Yet even as she sat there, silent and distant, she could feel something stirring within her, a quiet defiance that had not been there before. Perhaps it was too late to change the course of things, but there was one thing she was sure of: she would not continue to be invisible. Even if the family no longer saw her, she could still see them. And she could still change her fate. The evening had grown late, but the silence that had enveloped the estate was thick with a sense of finality. The family had gathered once more, this time for a quiet meeting to discuss the division of assets, the future of the estate, and matters that had long been left unspoken. The patriarch sat at the head of the table, as always, his presence commanding attention without effort. His voice was measured, calm, but there was an edge to it that told of decisions already made. Character 1 had remained silent through the entire discussion, her posture rigid as she observed the proceedings. The family's wealth was being divided, the future carefully planned, but what caught her attention was not the talk of land or inheritance, it was the cold, calculated manner in which the matter of family legacy was being handled. Her place at the table, once at the center, had now been reduced to the periphery, a mere formality. She had once believed that she would inherit the role of managing the estate, that her position as the eldest daughter would ensure her place in the family's future. But as the evening wore on, the truth became painfully clear: the estate was no longer hers to manage. The words of the patriarch, once directed at her with authority, now skipped over her as if she were invisible. Instead, they were focused on her sister, the younger daughter, the one who had always been favored. Her sister's name was mentioned with respect, her qualities praised with great admiration. No one spoke of her. No one even looked her way. The room was filled with soft murmurs of approval for her sister's future, her suitability for the role of managing the estate. The power of the family was being transferred, not to her, but to her sister. A sister who had always been seen as the perfect heir, the one who could fulfill the family's expectations. Character 1 tried to remain still, to suppress the growing sense of betrayal that stirred within her. She had worked her entire life for this, had always been taught that her position as the firstborn daughter would guarantee her this role. She had been the one trained in the ways of the estate, the one who had learned the intricacies of managing the household and its finances. And yet, here she sat, watching as her sister, so much younger, so much less deserving, was being handed the legacy that should have been hers. The weight of the injustice pressed down on her chest, a feeling that was both suffocating and numbing. The patriarch's gaze never strayed to her, he spoke of her sister's bright future as if there had never been another option. Her mother, the matriarch, sat quietly beside him, nodding in approval. Her face was serene, but her eyes avoided character 1's The coldness in those eyes was unmistakable, a silent agreement with the patriarch's decision. Character 1 had been pushed aside. She was no longer needed in this family, no longer relevant to its future. It was a quiet, insidious betrayal that no one spoke of aloud, but it was evident in every gesture, every word, every glance. The coldness that had once been subtle now seemed like a wall between her and the rest of the family. It was as if she had been erased from their future, a casualty of a power struggle that she had never even been allowed to be a part of. She could feel her heart beating faster, the sense of powerlessness growing with each passing moment. But still, she said nothing. She remained silent, the mask of composure firmly in place. She would not let them see the depth of her hurt. She would not let them know that the betrayal had cut deeper than any sword ever could. As the meeting drew to a close, the decision had been made. Her sister would take over the estate. The family's future was now hers to shape. An character 1 she was nothing more than a spectator. As the family dispersed, moving into the next room for a quiet drink, character 1 remained in her seat. The silence around her was deafening. She could hear the sounds of laughter from the others, but it felt as though they were in another world. She felt invisible, like a ghost in her own home. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, but still, she said nothing. It was a simple matter, her sister was the one chosen, and there was nothing she could do to change it. She had known this day would come, had known for some time that she was no longer the favored one. But knowing it and feeling it were two different things. The realization of being so thoroughly discarded, so thoroughly irrelevant, stung more than she had expected. It was as though her life, the life she had built with such care, had been a house of cards, fragile and easily toppled. Her sister's future had been decided for her, just as her own had been pushed aside. She was no longer the heiress, no longer the one who would inherit the family's legacy. It had all been taken from her, quietly, without ceremony, but with cold, deliberate calculation. Character 1 rose slowly from the table, her movement stiff, as though the weight of her own thoughts had become too much to bear. She made her way to the window, staring out into the night. The stars were barely visible through the thick clouds that hung low in the sky, as if the heavens themselves were cloaked in shadow. She wondered, not for the first time, if the world outside could feel as suffocating as the one she had just left. She had been betrayed by the very family she had served, and now, she was being pushed out of the only life she had ever known. The realization was sharp and bitter, but still, she could not bring herself to speak the words aloud. There was no need. They had already made their decision. They had already chosen. And she was no longer a part of their plans. The night air was thick with tension as the family gathered once more in the grand hall, this time for a formal banquet that had been long anticipated. The long table, set with fine porcelain and delicate gold trim, glittered under the soft light of the lanterns, casting shadows that stretched across the floor like silent sentinels. The patriarch was in high spirits, his words punctuated by laughter as he spoke with his most trusted advisors, but the true significance of the evening was clear to character 1 ***. This was not just any family gathering, it was the event where her future, or rather her lack of it, would be solidified in the eyes of the family. The younger daughter, as always, had taken her place by their father's side. Her presence was commanding, a smile playing at her lips as she exchanged words with the most powerful members of the family. Her beauty was undeniable, and so too was her role in the family's future. Character 1 ***, as the eldest, should have been the one at the center, at the very heart of these discussions. But instead, she was relegated to a seat further down the table, her presence nothing more than an afterthought, a polite inclusion but not a true part of the family's future. Her name, when spoken, was uttered with the same casual indifference as any other guest. It had been some time since anyone had asked for her opinion, or even considered her presence as something other than a formality. The coolness of the room seemed to press in on her, a weight that grew heavier with each passing moment. Every gesture, every word that passed from one family member to another, spoke volumes. And yet, the silence in the room, the silence that enveloped her, was the loudest sound of all. Character 1 *** had always understood the hierarchy of her family, had always known that her place was beneath her sisters, that she would never hold the same sway over the family's future. But tonight, the sharpness of the truth became undeniable. The family's business was being discussed in broad strokes, the decisions being made about the future were made with such ease, such certainty, and yet, none of it included her. It wasn't just the absence of her name, it was the absence of her very being from these discussions. The patriarch had been speaking of the family's future, of alliances to be made, of the power that would pass through their bloodline. It was to be her sister's future, her sister's role to play. Even as the discussions grew louder, character 1 *** could feel herself retreating further into the background, her presence no longer important in the grand scheme of things. The subtlety of the family's manipulation had become clear to her now. It was not just the quiet slights, the moments where her name was barely mentioned or her position ignored. It was the deliberate way in which the family had shifted its expectations, its affections, away from her and toward her sister. She had once believed, or perhaps hoped, that this was temporary, that there was still a place for her within the family. But as she sat there, listening to the conversation unfolding around her, the full realization hit her with brutal clarity. This was not an accident. It was not a matter of oversight. This was the structure of the family, and her place within it had been decided long ago. She was not needed. The realization made her feel cold, her hands growing clammy as she clenched them into fists beneath the table. There was no room for her here, no space for her in the future the family was shaping. As the evening progressed, the topic of her sister's marriage came up. It was to be a grand affair, a union with another prominent family, one that would further cement the family's place in the upper echelons of power. The patriarch spoke with such pride, such enthusiasm, as though this marriage was the culmination of years of hard work, of careful planning. But to character 1 ***, it was clear that this marriage was not just a joining of two families, it was a final seal on her own irrelevance. Her sister was the chosen one, the one who would carry the family's name forward. And in that moment, as she listened to the words of praise spoken about her sister, the last vestiges of her own hopes crumbled. She had never been given this kind of attention, this kind of validation. She had never been the one celebrated, the one chosen to lead. And she never would be. The weight of the injustice pressed down on her chest, the air growing thicker with each passing moment. Her sister was everything she could never be, the perfect daughter, the perfect heir, the perfect future of the family. An character 1 ** was nothing more than a shadow, lingering at the edges, a forgotten piece of the family's history. Her mind raced, but her body remained still, frozen in place. She could not bring herself to speak, to argue, to plead for a place that no longer existed. The silent rejection was too much to bear. As the conversation continued, character 1 stood up from her seat, her movement slow, deliberate. She felt as though the weight of the room, the weight of the family's expectations, was pressing down on her shoulders. She could no longer sit there, pretending that nothing had changed, that she still held a place in the family's future. She turned toward the door, her steps quiet but firm. No one noticed her leaving. No one called her name. As she stepped out of the hall, into the cool night air, she stood still for a moment, the full weight of her reality settling around her. The door to the family's future had closed, and she had been locked outside. She had known, deep down, that this was coming, but to have it confirmed so publicly, so decisively, was something she could not have prepared for. The family she had always known, the family she had once believed would embrace her, had turned its back on her. And as she walked away from the hall, the coldness of the night air wrapping around her, she felt a door in her heart close as well. It was not just the end of the evening, it was the end of everything she had ever hoped for. The truth was undeniable now. She had been forgotten. And in this silence, in this moment of painful clarity, she understood that she had no place in the family anymore. The heavy door to the family hall swung closed behind her with a quiet finality. The soft clink of the latch echoed in the empty corridor, but the sound felt distant, detached, as if it came from another world. Character 1 paused for a moment in the hallway, her hand still resting on the doorframe as though trying to hold on to something that was no longer there. The familiar scent of sandalwood lingered in the air, the warmth from the central hearth creeping through the walls, but it all felt hollow now. The house that had once been her home, her sanctuary, now felt like an unfamiliar space, cold and indifferent. Her heart ached with an emptiness she could not fill, and yet, there was no room for her grief here, not in the space that had been so carefully arranged to exclude her. She stood there, still as stone, her gaze flicking to the hallway in front of her, the path leading back into the family's quarters. No servant came to greet her, no familiar face paused to acknowledge her presence. The rules of decorum, once observed with unspoken care, no longer applied to her. She had long been a part of this daily rhythm, walking through the halls with a sense of ownership, of belonging. But now, the absence of greeting, the lack of acknowledgement, was a cold reminder that she was no longer a part of the core of the family. The change was subtle, but it stung. The quiet that stretched through the corridor, the lack of attention, the slow, deliberate pace of her steps, all these things seemed to carry the weight of the shift in power, a shift she had tried to ignore for so long. It had been the small things at first, the way her sister's name was mentioned with increasing frequency, the way servants served her first, the way her father's gaze always found her sister before it ever sought her own. But now, as she stood in this space, the stark reality was clear. She had been replaced. She had been pushed aside. Her role in the family was no longer even a shadow of what it had been. The weight of this truth pressed heavily on her chest as she walked deeper into the hall. The silence was suffocating. She passed by rooms once filled with laughter and familial warmth, but now those rooms felt abandoned, their walls hollow, their purpose altered. She reached the doorway to the room where she had once studied the estate's accounts, a room she had always considered her own. But as she entered, she was struck by how empty it felt. The desk where she had once spent hours poring over the family ledgers was now bare, the papers cleared away, the seat at the desk now empty. The room, once her sanctuary, had been claimed by someone else, her sister, perhaps, or another member of the family. The realization sent a chill down her spine. Everything had been taken from her, and now even the space she had once considered hers had been altered, emptied, erased. She stepped inside, her fingers lightly brushing over the smooth surface of the desk, but there was no comfort to be found here anymore. The room had lost its warmth, its meaning. It was no longer hers to command, no longer hers to fill with her presence. The silence was oppressive, but she forced herself to remain still, to suppress the tears that threatened to rise. She had no place for them now. The family no longer had room for her emotions, her sorrow. She stepped out of the room, her movement slow and deliberate. Each step seemed to carry her further away from the woman she had once been, the woman who had been at the heart of this family. Her heart, once full of purpose and hope, now seemed to wither under the weight of what had been stolen from her. As she walked through the hallway, she noticed the servants passing by, their faces downcast, their eyes avoiding hers. No longer did they greet her with the small courtesies of their daily tasks, no longer did they pause to ask if she needed something. They moved around her as though she were no more than a fixture of the house, no more than a shadow in the background. The servants had once treated her with respect, with an acknowledgement of her position in the family. Now, they simply passed by, as though she had ceased to exist in their eyes. Her heart clenched at the thought, but she did not allow herself to react. There was no point in reacting, no point in showing the vulnerability that had been forced upon her. She would remain silent, even as the world around her turned cold. She continued walking, her feet carrying her through the halls that had once felt so familiar, so safe. The walls that had once provided comfort now seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with their silence. She passed the family portraits that lined the walls, paintings of ancestors long dead, their faces stoic and proud. She wondered, briefly, if they would have ever imagined a moment like this, a moment where their own bloodline had turned its back on one of their own. But the answer came quickly, no, they would not have. These portraits, these images of the past, were a reminder of everything that had once been hers, everything that had once been her inheritance. And yet now, they stood as silent witnesses to her fall from grace. Character 1 reached the door to the family courtyard, the last threshold between her and the rest of the world. She paused there, her hand resting lightly on the handle. She knew that stepping through this door would mean leaving behind the family she had known, leaving behind the life she had built. But in that moment, there was nothing left for her in this house, nothing left for her in this family. The door was the final barrier, the final step away from the center of their world. She pushed it open slowly, the sound of the hinges creaking softly, but it was enough. She stepped into the courtyard, her gaze lingering on the quiet garden before her. The moonlight filtered softly through the trees, casting long shadows across the stones. The silence was broken only by the faint rustle of the leaves in the wind. She did not look back as she walked away from the house, from the life she had once known. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure: this family, this house, had moved on without her. And she had no place in their future. The night stretched long, the cool breeze sweeping through the empty courtyard as character 1 stood at the threshold of her room, staring out into the moonlit garden. The weight of the past few days, weeks, months had not fully settled, but the edge had dulled. She no longer felt the sharp sting of betrayal that had once consumed her, it had been replaced by something else, something colder, more deliberate. Her fingers brushed against the wooden frame of the door as she stepped inside, her movement slow but purposeful. The room was unchanged, or at least it seemed so at first glance. The tapestries that hung from the walls still displayed the family's ancestral crest, and the delicate porcelain vases remained in their places on the shelves. The space still held traces of the person she used to be, but it no longer felt like hers. It felt like a place she had outgrown, a place that no longer served her. She closed the door behind her softly, sealing herself inside with her thoughts. She had no desire to relive the past, no need to cling to the familiar comforts that had once given her solace. Instead, she moved toward the desk in the corner, where the family's financial ledgers lay, untouched for days. She sat down and reached for the first volume, her fingers grazing the edges of the pages as she flipped through them methodically. Each column of numbers, each notation felt distant, but it was also the key. The key to everything she had been forced to abandon. As she read the figures, her mind wasn't just focused on the records, but on the power they represented, the power she had once held and could claim again. The numbers, the carefully drawn lines, they were not just about wealth or assets, they were about control. And now, she needed to take that control back, not in the form of overt action, but in the quiet reclaiming of her place. She paused as her eye skimmed a particular line, a small but important detail about the dowry arrangements, the promised gifts that had once been hers to manage. Her sister's dowry had been listed in the margin, a sum much larger than her own had ever been. The realization that her sister had been elevated, not just by the family's favor, but by the wealth and power that had been denied her, settled like a cold stone in her stomach. But this wasn't something she would voice, not yet. The family's wealth, its future, was still in her hands. She could feel the quiet surge of power building within her as she carefully marked the discrepancy, a note to herself. The balance had been tipped, but not beyond repair. She set the ledger aside and moved to the next item on her list, her dowry chest, the one that had been sealed for years. The lacquered wood gleamed in the low light, its delicate carvings of birds and flowers faintly visible. It had once been a symbol of her worth, her place in the family's future. Now, it was a relic of the past, a reminder of what she had lost. Her hands moved carefully as she unlocked the chest, the metal key turning in the lock with a soft click. Inside were the carefully curated items she had once believed would secure her place, the silks, the jewels, the small family heirlooms that had been set aside for her marriage, for her future. She ran her fingers over the fabric, the weight of the jewelry, the smooth edges of the family's treasured trinkets. Each item was a memory, each piece a mark of her previous life, one she had once believed she would lead. But as she examined each piece, there was no sense of longing, no sadness. She felt only the coolness of recognition. These things no longer defined her. She was beyond this life now. Slowly, she began to gather the items, placing them neatly into a smaller box. The chest would remain here, untouched, as it had always been. It was not for her to open again. The small, deliberate actions felt like steps toward something she hadn't yet named. The process was slow, meticulous, each item packed away with a sense of closure, as though she were placing away the life she had once known, packing it into a box that she would never open again. But beneath the quiet exterior, there was a shift, subtle, but undeniable. She was no longer seeking approval, no longer hoping for recognition. The family, her place in it, her title, these things no longer held the same weight. They no longer held any claim over her. The very space she had once filled with her presence, with her authority, now felt empty, and the emptiness was hers to shape. She closed the chest with a final, deliberate motion, locking it once more. It would remain there, undisturbed. She did not need to reclaim what had been lost. What was more important now was to decide what to build, from the ground up. She moved to the window, staring out into the courtyard once more. The moon was high now, casting a pale light across the stone path. The garden, once vibrant with the warmth of her family's gatherings, was now a place she could only observe from a distance. She had long been a part of it, but no longer. The courtyard was theirs, not hers. She would not return to that life. Not anymore. Her hands rested on the window sill, her fingers pressing into the cool stone, the weight of her thoughts grounding her. She had learned to endure the family's dismissal, to accept their decisions, but it was time for something different now. It was time to take control, to step away from the shadows and begin anew. The moment had come for her to reshape her future, not in the confines of the family's power, but outside of it. The world was larger than the narrow confines of the estate, and she would carve out her place in it. It would not be through the approval of those who had discarded her, nor through the titles and honors that had once defined her. It would be through her own choices, her own path. Character 1 turned away from the window and walked slowly to the door. The quiet resolve in her heart was now something she could feel in her very bones. She had made her decision. The family no longer controlled her. She was free. And with that freedom, she would take back what was always hers, her fate. The morning light crept softly through the drawn curtains, casting long, delicate shadows across the floor of the room. Character 1 stood by the window, her gaze lingering on the quiet courtyard outside. The sounds of the estate were still, almost unnatural in their silence. The servants had already gone about their duties, but none of the usual chatter, the calls of the housemaids, or the distant clinking of dishes filled the air. Everything had shifted, and she was no longer a part of the world that once had a place for her. The quiet was her only companion now, but it was not the silence of defeat. It was the stillness of clarity. She no longer sought approval, nor did she crave recognition from those who had long since turned away. The family's power, its wealth, its history, it no longer mattered. What mattered now was what she would do next. The path ahead was her own, and with each breath she took, the weight of the past grew lighter. Her fingers tightened on the wooden edge of the window, feeling its cool surface beneath her touch. The room, though filled with the remnants of her former life, no longer felt like her own. The items she had once arranged with care, the books that had once been her source of knowledge and strength, now seemed out of place. The person who had once occupied this space, the person who had fought to be seen, to be heard, no longer existed. And in that, there was a strange sense of peace. She had become someone else. A new sense of self had settled into her bones, and with it came the quiet understanding that she no longer needed the validation of a family that had already decided her worth. The past, with all its hurt and rejection, had become a distant memory, a chapter that she would never return to. But there was one thing left to do before she could move forward, one final step. Character 1 move to the desk in the corner of the room, the familiar place where she had spent countless hours, but now it was no longer hers. The papers, the ledgers, the plans for the family's future, everything she had once controlled, were scattered across the surface. But today, she would not simply walk away from this life. She would take the last pieces that belonged to her. Her fingers brushed over the documents, her eyes scanning the familiar lines. The dowry agreements, the ledgers of the family's wealth, the carefully crafted plans for the estate's future, everything she had once been denied. But this time, she would not simply let them slip away. Her hand reached for the small wooden box beneath the desk. The box had always been hers to keep, a symbol of her status and her role in the family. Inside, hidden beneath the velvet lining, was the family seal, the symbol of her authority, her right to control. It had been taken from her, but today, she would take it back. Her fingers closed around the seal, its weight familiar, its coldness a reminder of everything she had once lost. But now, it was a reminder of everything she could reclaim. With a slow, deliberate motion, she placed the seal into a small pouch at her waist, securing it tightly. There was no ceremony, no grand gesture. The action was simple, quiet, but its significance was profound. She was no longer a part of this family's power structure. She no longer needed their approval, their recognition. She was free. As she stood, her gaze shifted to the door. The heavy wooden frame that had once marked her entry into this world now felt like a barrier, a boundary she had long since crossed. The family, the estate, the legacy, all of it had been taken from her. But now, she stood on the threshold, no longer bound by its constraints. The family's power no longer held sway over her. And for the first time in years, she felt the weight of the future lighten. She turned away from the desk and walked toward the door, her steps deliberate, measured. Her fingers brushed against the edges of the doorframe as she stepped into the corridor. The house, once so familiar, now felt foreign, almost alien to her. The air was thick with the weight of her decision, but there was no turning back now. Her mind was clear, her resolve unwavering. The patriarch's name, her mother's approval, the family's legacy, all of it had been taken from her. But she had something far more powerful now, her own sense of self. As she walked through the halls, there was no longer a need to look over her shoulder, to seek anyone's gaze. She had reclaimed her place in the world, not by their rules, but by her own. The family, the estate, it was theirs now. But the future? The future was hers. She reached the courtyard, the cool air brushing against her skin as she stepped outside. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden light across the stone paths and the lush greenery of the garden. She paused for a moment, taking in the scene before her. The estate, the family's legacy, the life she had known, it was all behind her now. The world ahead was wide open, full of possibilities. And for the first time, she was no longer a part of someone else's story. She was the author of her own. There was no need for grand speeches, no need for public declarations. The quiet action she had taken, the reclaiming of the seal, the quiet withdrawal from the family's power, was enough. It was the final step in a journey she had started long ago, but one she could only complete on her own terms. She took a deep breath, her heart steady, her mind clear. And with that, she took her first step away from the life she had once known, away from the family that had cast her aside. The future was hers to shape. And as she walked, the past faded behind her, a distant memory, no longer relevant to the path she now walked alone. What was left to prove, after all, when you had already reclaimed everything that truly mattered?